Thanks for listening to this podcast of Trending with Timmery. If you haven't already subscribed, please catch us wherever you love to listen to your podcast, from the Relevant Radio app to Apple, YouTube, you name it, we are there. And if you listen on Apple Podcasts, please be sure to go and give us a 5-star review to help other people discover the podcast. Anything you share in terms of episodes, whether it's texting it to a friend, posting on social media, helps to build up the kingdom for God, to help confront the challenging issues we face as a culture, but with joy, with hope, and with an eternal perspective where our faith collides with everyday life, bringing eternal principles to help us live our life joyfully.
So, what's trending? Bridging your Catholic faith with your everyday life. You're listening to Trending with Timmery on Relevant Radio.
Hello. Happy New Year. Welcome to the program. My name is Brooke Taylor in for Timmery. It's good to be back with you. I'm pleased to be one of the guest hosts filling in during Timmery's maternity leave. Such a blessed reason to be here. And for those of you who follow her on social media, you may have already seen that her sweet baby is here. Another daughter joining mom and dad and big sister. She was born on December 28th, the Feast of the Holy Innocents. But in the last few days, there was a development with the baby, concern about her oxygen. So your prayers are certainly powerful, so appreciated for that intention. And thankfully, the most recent update that I saw was very encouraging as of just this afternoon, that the baby is much better. It sounds like mom is getting some sleep. So we will keep you updated. And again, your prayers are so appreciated and very felt. In the meantime, we are here. It's a full show on today's program. Dr. Kevin Vost will be here. He is the author of 20 books, including Memorize the Faith and How to Think Like Aquinas. He is also a member of the Research Review Committee for the American Mensa Society, which promotes the scientific study of human intelligence. And his latest book is called You Are That Temple, a Catholic Guide to Health and Holiness. So we will look at getting healthy from the perspective of faith, but also neuroscience. So it's a dynamic duo there. And also Catholic journalist Bree Dail will be joining us from Rome to take us into the events at the Vatican this week. Of course, the passing of Pope Benedict XVI, his lying in state, the funeral on Thursday, and just today, the release of his spiritual will. And so we're going to explore that. Just look at the text, and she will get us up to speed on the latest. On Friday, the USCCB released guidance for mourning and how the faithful may pray for the former pontiff. And I want to link that document in today's show. And if you actually read the memo, it's really quite beautiful, but I wanted to share just a few of the highlights. And this is what it says, quoting, "Bishops are instructed to contact all the parishes and parochial schools asking for immediate prayers for the deceased former pontiff. The custom of praying the Our Father, Hail Mary, and Glory be to the Father is to be encouraged," says the document, especially with school children, as is the recitation of the Rosary for the repose of his soul. Churches may display a portrait of the late Holy Father with black bunting, and church bells may be tolled. And both the diocesan bishop and priests in every parish might consider offering a special mass for the deceased Pope Emeritus. And it goes on. It's fantastic. It talks about the custom of 9 days following the funeral of a pope are observed as official days of mourning. And one thing I have been encouraged by is to see the outpouring, so many masses and prayers. There was a prayer after our traditional Latin Mass on Sunday that we all as a parish stayed and offered for the repose of his soul. And today in our diocese, I reside in the Diocese of Youngstown, Ohio, and that's in the northeast part of the state. Bishop David Bonner celebrated a special Mass, and 2 of our sons were altar servers for that. What a blessing that was. And they served for the bishop at that Mass today. It was beautiful. In his homily, he talked about the efficacy of the prayers of the faithful, as well as the legacy of Pope Benedict XVI. Of course, his outstanding theological mind, but also his beautiful heart. So in the days to come and around the world, this is what we see. This is the family we are a part of, the universal church coming together for this purpose, and certainly in Rome. And that is where my first guest resides. Bree Dail is a Catholic journalist. She is the Rome correspondent for the Daily Wire and joins us now to give us the latest on the passing of Pope Emeritus Benedict the 16th. Good evening, Bree.
Morning, very early morning here in Rome. How are you, Brooke?
Yes, it is. Good. I know it's about 1 a.m. local time in Rome there. Is that right?
That's correct.
And so thank you for staying up, but I also know on the heels of a trip as well, you just returned to the city after being in Assisi. I know I saw you ring in the new year there, but for a few days. And just in general, as you've traveled and you were there during the last few days here, what has it been like?
So in Assisi, it was actually quite astonishing how many people were at the Requiem Mass for Pope Benedict that took place in St. Francis's Basilica. And it was led by the Archbishop of Assisi to celebrate really the life of Benedict. He spoke on Pope Benedict being really a stalwart defender of orthodoxy. He spoke about how he was one who worked very hard, tirelessly in the Congregation of the Doctrine of the Faith against relativism. And so it was just astonishing. The entire church was filled, which kind of was on the heels of some concerns that I had watching what was happening in the Vatican, where I'm sure you saw and many of the listeners saw reports that were differing coming out of the Vatican saying that, say, the Vatican rang the morning bells at St. Peter's. They rang morning bells in Assisi, for sure, it happened, but at St. Peter's, it did not happen when Pope Emeritus Benedict died, despite the reports from the BBC and elsewhere. So I wanted to really make that clear. There have been some very interesting changes being made, some precedents set for, I think, future emeritus popes, if there are future Pope Emeriti.
Mm. And with regards to the morning bells, you said that they really can't be mistaken. They have a lower tone. It's very obvious.
Yes. It's okay. Very, for whom the bell tolls. It's very somber. Anybody who goes online and looks at the videos from when Pope John Paul II died, you will hear this very low tone bell that is rung in a very measured way, and it's rung for a long time. And we do hear those bells rung not just for a pope who has died. During the funerals of cardinals, those bells are rung. And there was one situation where Mountain, the Catholic traveler, who maybe many people have seen on TV recently because he's been in the square since the announcement that Pope Benedict was sick. He and I both had heard the morning bells being tolled, like randomly. There was no announcement. This was about 6 months ago. No announcement of any cardinals' funerals taking place. So we hear the bell being tolled, and it's tolling for a while. And so it wasn't a mistake. So both of us ran to St. Peter's thinking, oh my goodness, this is unprecedented what has happened. Well, it seems like there was a mistake, that it hadn't been announced that the cardinal who had retired was having a funeral that day. So we found that out. But that does occur, that it also happens for the cardinals during their funerals. So what is expected, even though I've not received any update, I hopefully will today from Matteo Bruni, the spokesman for the Vatican Press Corps. But I'm hoping to hear the reasoning behind the Vatican's, choice not to toll the bell for a pope who has died, at the time that he has died. But it does seem to me that there was a message that was put out, and what that message is. Seems to be a bit of, on the Vatican side, the need to distinguish Pope Benedict from, Pope Francis being the active pope.
And the emeritus. Okay. We will follow your feed just for clarity on that when hopefully you are able to get an update from a source at the Vatican there. And you had mentioned the norms and how things maybe be different. And I saw, well, we know now that he is lying in state, and I've sources say up to 65,000 people or more expected to pay their respects to Pope Benedict XVI. The funeral is on Thursday, and for the first time in modern history, a sitting pope will preside over his predecessor's funeral. And we've been told that it will be solemn but simple. Any insight on what that means exactly? What can we expect?
Right. So my editors at the Daily Wire actually contacted me today because it wasn't really reported out. So this will probably be a first for many listeners today. But Marie Jean-Pierre said at a press conference on the 1st that the President of the United States was asked by the Vatican not to attend. Now, there have been rumors circulating in the Vatican in the past week that heads of state were debating whether or not they were being able to come to the Vatican for the funeral. But we've seen many heads of state come, heads of state from Italy, Hungary, from all over already starting to pay their respects. So it just seems to be a lot of kind of chaos as there are many firsts here. Like you said, we haven't seen in church history that we know of a pope residing over the funeral of another pope. We don't know whether or not that was the case in the early church where that did occur, but for 600 years we didn't have a case of a Pope Emeritus. So there's no record of how to do things properly. But what is interesting is that the Vatican, when they came out and they said this, they said Pope Emeritus Benedict desired a simple funeral. And of course, that's the Vatican speaking on behalf of Pope Francis and Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI. But we can't go to Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI and say, now, did you want a muted funeral? We don't have a copy of his will. We have his last testament, as I know you would like to speak on, but, all we can go off of is the statement from, the press office here in the Vatican. That's all we can say. We can't really confirm anything other than that.
And just to clarify, so you said this was an official source at the Vatican, and you were told that President Biden was asked not to attend?
So no, Marie Jean-Pierre, the spokesman for the White House, said that the Vatican asked the Vatican asked President Biden not to attend, and so that they will be sending instead the ambassador to the Holy See. So
okay, thank you.
That's news to me that the Vatican would ask heads of state. So I am intending to speak to Matteo Bruni on that as well. Was it the case that the Vatican asked heads of state not to come, or is that an interpretation by the Vatican?
Okay, so we will see that unfolding.
The White House.
Right,
yes.
Okay. You had just mentioned about the spiritual testament of Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI that was released today, and the Vatican has a published transcript. It's so beautiful, and I think it's only about 6 paragraphs. It's not a long document, but certainly rich with depth. And just to begin how it starts, I'll read a few sentences. It says, "When at this late hour of my life, I look back on the decades I have wandered through, I see first of all how much reason I have to give thanks. Above all, I thank God himself, the giver of all good gifts, who has given me life and guided me through all kinds of confusion, who has always picked me up when I began to slip, and who has always given me anew the light of his countenance. In retrospect, I see and understand that even the dark and arduous stretches of this path were for my salvation, and that he guided me well in those very stretches." He goes on to thank his parents who gave him life, and to thank his siblings and the men and women that were always by his side, and his compatriots. And you had a chance to read this document. What strikes you about it, Bree?
Well, I love the format first, where, many of our Christians, brothers and sisters, also understand that the proper format of prayer is praise and thanksgiving first and foremost. Praise and thanksgiving, and that's what he gave in this. It's just, when you read through, petition really is at the end. He asks for prayers, but outside of that, it's all about praise and thanksgiving, and it's a reflection, deep reflection. I loved what he said about within his the path of darkness that he has gone through, that he can look back now and see where God was doing amazing work in his life during that time. I think many people can reflect on that and say, I hope the same, that I can look back in my life and say, wow, during those times, God was really holding my hand. I love how he reflected on his thanks of growing up at the foothills in Bavaria, of the mountains there. I love the fact that he asks forgiveness for those who he may have wronged. And then my favorite part of this whole, and it's just, I definitely recommend people to go and read it, because it really shows the heart of this gentle, introverted man, but very intellectual and very contemplative. My favorite part on it, though, was where he calls people to stand firm in the faith. Do not be confused. And then he says, a lot of the science, whether it's social science or even physical science right now, has changed throughout his life. And they've always kind of pointed to try to undermine the faith. He says, that's not science, that's philosophy. That's like a philosophy of science. Science is the physical understanding of things that we can see, and they kind of overarch a bit. And so he says, the scriptures will always win out. The faith will always win out. And it always ends up being that the sciences will support the faith. So I found that I don't know, it was just something that I really love, especially in these times.
I want to conclude with that. I'm picking up right where you were talking about that. And he says, for 60 years now, I have accompanied the path of theology, especially biblical studies. We know this man was a brilliant intellect, theologian, scholar. He says, I have seen seemingly unshakable theses collapse with the changing generations, which turned out to be mere hypothesis. The liberal generation, the existentialist generation, the Marxist generation. I have seen and see how the tangle of hypotheses, the reasonableness of faith, has emerged and is emerging anew. Jesus Christ is truly the way, the truth, and the life, and the church, and all her shortcomings, is truly his body. And as you mentioned, just the very last line is where it goes to petition. Everything else is thanksgiving. Finally, I humbly ask, pray for me so that the Lord may admit me to the eternal dwellings, despite all my sins and shortcomings. For all those entrusted to me, my heartfelt prayer goes out day after day. Bree, I know that we have to wrap up here, but one of the most profound stories to come out in the last several days was the announcement of his last words. And I know throughout different shows here on Relevant Radio, it's been talked about and just appreciated. And I understand that they were in German, of course, his native tongue. Can you just give us a little insight into that, how you heard, and I guess what you think it speaks of his legacy?
Well, from what I understand, early within those first 2 hours, a Spanish media outlet with a very credible journalist spoke directly with his former secretary, Archbishop Gonswein. And the Archbishop said that his last words were, "Jesus, I love you." And it's just, to me, later on we saw, some contradictions instead of Jesus. Some of the mainstream media said that he said Lord. I tend to think that it probably was Jesus. But in any case, what beautiful sentiments for the last words on earth to say is, "Jesus, I love you." To me, I don't believe in canonizing people very shortly after their death. I believe that it's so important to pray for the dead, and especially for Pope Emeritus Benedict. There's a lot of suffering that has taken place in the church that he actually had to take on when he became Pope. the sex abuse crises and all of the scandals that started to come out. And remember, if you recall, when he became Pope, he asked for prayers so that he would not flee the wolves as shepherd. And so I know many people have mixed feelings about, his resigning the papacy. But I think in this case, just for the fact that he said, "Jesus, I love you" at the end, I think it's a gift that I think we should, just kind of contemplate and pray for him, and hope that if he is in purgatory, that his time in purgatory is very short. And if he's in heaven, that he prays for us.
Amen. And just those simple words, the magnum opus of a brilliant man, certainly. And we're just grateful. Your conscientious reporting is always appreciated, Bree. And I know you will continue to have the latest coverage in the days to come. And we definitely want to glue into your feed. Can you tell us how we can follow you?
So definitely on Twitter, at the Daily Wire. I'm very proud to be working alongside Ben Shapiro, Jordan Peterson, and others. And so at the Daily Wire, I will be reporting quite a bit this week. Emerald Robinson will have me on her show as well. So hopefully you'll be able to see me on social media. Twitter is where to follow me the most, or Facebook.
So grateful for your work. Bree Dail joining us again from Rome. God bless you. Thank you so much, Bree. Good night.
Good night, Brooke. Thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you again to Bree Dail. And by the way, I think Jim right now is checking to see if we have it posted on Relevant Radio. When we were talking about the spiritual testament of Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, it is something worth reading, worth sharing. After I saw it this morning, I printed it off for my 11-year-old son just to sit with and read. He's not yet going back to school. That's tomorrow, but everyone else is back at school. So he was able to just sit, and even at his age, he was able to really comprehend what this text was. And so for all of us, I think it would be efficacious. It's the spiritual testament of Pope Emeritus Benedict XVI, and it was written in 2016. It was about a year and 4 months after he was elected to the papacy. So we will post that. And I'm looking here, Twitter at Timmery. If you go to Twitter, Patrick, thank you so much. And Jim, they will make sure that that is posted for you as well. My name is Brooke Taylor, in for Timmery on maternity leave. After the break, Dr. Kevin Vost joins us. His latest book is You Are That Temple. He has a unique understanding of getting healthy from the perspective of faith and neuroscience. So if one of your goals for the new year is improving or just maintaining your health, you don't want to miss what he has to say. You are listening to Trending. Stay with us.
You're listening to Trending with Timmery, where you can discuss what matters most to you. Join the conversation, 888-914-9149.
All right, we're going to get some protein, vitamins, iron, all the good stuff. I get this good stuff all the time. We're going to get the vitamins here. We're going to get the raisins. All right, get the raisin and nut. That's good. That's good.
Oh, T, there's a lot of good stuff in here, man. This is your place, huh?
That's right. That's right. You get the raisins. Raisins and nuts is good, man. Makes you hungry, makes you mean.
I heard these raisins will help all that hot protein and everything.
That's right.
Burn off quick,
it's
man.
that iron. Definitely.
All right.
Definitely. Finish the workout. We got to get good stuff. Come on. Come on. We're going to get the good stuff. Make sure you get the good stuff. You don't get good stuff, I'm going to put it back.
Oh my, does that voice bring back both voices? Do those voices bring back memories? Producer Jim, I apologize because I probably should have set that clip up ahead of time, but maybe you recognize it without me even telling you whose voices those are. It is Mr. T, circa maybe 1990, could be earlier, grocery shopping for healthy food with his buddy Hulk Hogan. That was an era. Remember that whole era? My name is Brooke Taylor, in for Timmery. Welcome back to the program. And that is our lead-in to my next guest, who, not to put an age on him, but has probably been pumping iron for as long as Mr. T, but also working on the discipline of asceticism, of the spirit and the mind. He is Dr. Kevin Vost, the author of 20 books, including Memorize the Faith and How to Think Like Aquinas. He has taught psychology at Aquinas College in Nashville, is a member of the Research Review Committee for American Mensa, and joins us now on the program. Welcome to the show, Dr. Vost.
Thanks for having me on, Brooke. And I love that clip. Yes, that brings back fond memories of of Mr. T and Hulk as they're going through that grocery store trying to find the foods that are going to make them even bigger and meaner than they already were.
Yep, that's right. They were looking for the protein. They needed the shakes, and just brought back a lot of memories. And I know you remember those days, because when did you start? Was it in the 1970s where you first got into bodybuilding?
Yeah, I remember actually I got my first barbell set just in second grade. That was back in 1968. By 73, I was working out regularly, and my first Olympic weightlifting contest was in November of 1976. So it's been a long time.
And in the plethora of books that you've written on neuroscience and the faith and Aquinas and memorizing the faith, also is fitness. I know this is your third one, and I want to get to your latest one. Also, this article that I sent you, and I want to go over it together, that was just published on New Year's Day. It's from the Daily Mail, but they are predictions of the biggest health and fitness trends they expect will emerge in 2023. And I felt like you would be the perfect person to vet this with. So we want to get to that. But for now, your latest book, it's called You Are That Temple, A Catholic Guide to Health and Holiness. Back in August, you joined me. We talked about it here on Relevant Radio, but this is a brand new calendar year, and studies show a whole lot of people make a recommitment to health this time of year. I was even just thinking too, so much of the conversation today has been about Damar Hamlin and, the NFL player who collapsed yesterday. And those moments, I think, just collectively shake us when we see here is a guy who's young. He is in what seems to be, externally anyway, the height of athletic condition. And in a moment, we're reminded of the fragility of our health and the gift of every breath. And so we want to honor God with our life, with our years, and the physical body that he's given us. And as I mentioned, this is your third book on health and fitness. You've dedicated so many years to helping people in this regard. So I want to start there. Why do you think the aspect of health and nutrition continues to be such a struggle for so many?
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of reason, and it sure is. And I will say, with even the New Year's resolution type thing, in the last couple of years, I have really reined in my diet. But even this year, there's a few imperfections. I'm striving to improve myself, because yes, we have the sad example of even young professional athletes. We never know when we could have a significant health problem. There could be genetics, all kinds of possible factors. But it is a good thing to try to make ourselves as healthy as possible. And for most of us, we can make a real difference in how we feel and how healthy we are. But why is it such a struggle? Well, I think one thing, in our modern time, if I focus first just on nutrition, of course, we're busy people. There's so many temptations. There's so many foods in those supermarkets and all those restaurants that we drive by that are convenient. They don't take much time. They're appetizing, so we're always tempted to go for something that's easier, more convenient than maybe something that we know would be healthier for us to eat. And even in that regard, if we really do try to, okay, this year I'm going to buckle down, I'm going to eat right, well, then we're kind of faced with the fact that we're often given conflicting advice by what does it really mean to eat right. So I think that's a big part of it. We're rushed. It's easier to eat some foods sometimes that aren't as healthy for us, and we may be confused about what we really should be eating.
I want to go over some of the numbers. The average American adult, this is according from You Are That Temple, the data says the average adult today in America weighs about 25 pounds more than the average American did 40 years ago. According to the CDC, over 73% of American adults are carrying too much weight, 73%. And of course, the comorbidities that come with that can be devastating. And I think a lot of people have a desire, but like you said, it could just be time, priorities, busyness, maybe feeling they don't have the luxury or the resources perhaps to spend hours in the gym or eat an organic diet. And so I think for me, having myself personally made an enormous change, the biggest change I've made in my life as an adult in the last year, I looked at the model of St. Therese of Lisieux and in the little way. And it's the small daily steps that we take. And for those who are advanced in the spiritual life, you're already there. So it's the same premise where just as you are consistent in prayer, penance, and in devotions, and maybe you plan the day before, when you're going to pray and what's a good time for you to pray. So are these small steps of taking one meal at a time. For us and our family, I'm a caregiver. We have 5 children. and I have to prep my meals. And so we might just grill our protein on the weekends, and then it makes it easier during the week. They're not super fancy comfort food casseroles every night, but it's been a great help. And it's one thing at a time, one workout at a time, building that foundation. And I think the beauty about that is that it's never too late. And so for you, I know, as you mentioned, 1968 was when you got your first barbell set. What have you observed about this stage of your life? I guess, do you have any words of encouragement for the older demographic who might feel like, I don't even know where to start, and is it too late?
Oh, absolutely. It absolutely is not too late. I even write in the book how some of these people who start really taking care of themselves later in life, especially in terms of exercise, may have some advantages. They may not have accrued some injuries that some of us more athletic folks may have acquired as we were younger that are now hanging with us. But no, I mean, in terms of like building your bodily strength and endurance, there are people training who start in their 70s and 80s. The muscles will still respond. You know, if we give them the right kind of training, give them the right kind of nutrition, and they are like going back to Therese, the little flower who I love dearly. She's got the idea right there. Those small, little, simple things we can do can make a big difference. So in terms of nutrition, one simple way I think to look at it is to think, you know, to eat more real foods than the ultra-processed foods. But because as we've had these epidemics in obesity and diabetes, we know that the intake of packaged ultra-processed foods has gone through the ceiling. We know now for kids and teens in the U.S., it's over two-thirds of what they eat in a day. 67% of their calories on average come from these processed foods, and we'd be a lot healthier if we went back to foods that we might think, well, what did my great-grandparents eat? You know, what kind of foods were available then? And chances are it's what you find in the outside aisles of the grocery store: meat, vegetables, dairy, fruits, and so on. So one simple thing we can do is just simply try to eat more real food. You know, it may not be organic, it may not be gourmet, but that's a simple step. Eat more real food and less of the stuff that comes in the packages. And even in terms of exercise, I write in terms of strength training. A person can do a strength training workout, which might be, you know, barbells or dumbbells or machines or even just their own body weight exercises. In as little as one session a week, less than a half an hour, once a week, can make a significant difference at any point in the lifespan. And in terms of like aerobic or endurance exercise, it could be something as simple as, you know, walking your dog, mowing your lawn, you know, vacuuming your house. Those little things can be done almost every day, and they too can make a big difference.
Dr. Kevin Vost is joining us. His latest book is You Are That Temple. And if you have a question, the number is 1-888-914-9149 to join us. I do want to ask a question that just came in regarding strength training. I'm curious about the most balanced approach for a sixth grader who really wants to start hitting the weights. Any thoughts on that, Kevin?
Yes. Well, I'd say, you know, as long as the sixth grader is healthy, has doctor approval, yes, weight training can start at that age. The general advice is, you know, make sure they're knowing how to do it properly. Focus on just a handful of basic exercises, some kind of a push, which would be some kind of a bench press or overhead press, some kind of a leg exercise like a squat, some kind of a pull like a row or a chin-up. So just a handful of these basic body movements can do a world of good. But I would say for a person in sixth grade, again, we want to make sure they're doing them in proper form and safely. And we're going to want to make sure they're not going out there and trying to see how much they can lift, you know, to best their buddies. They want to make sure they're using a weight that they can control for a fair number of repetitions, 5 to 12 or so. But as long as it's done in a supervised way and not too frequently, you know, just a few times a week is plenty, I think it can be a very excellent way to train. And I will say I can throw out another book recommendation, too, specifically for young kids. If someone might want to be interested, it's called Strong Kids, Healthy Kids by Frederick Hahn, H-A-H-N. Kind of, I guess, same last name as our friend Scott Hahn.
Strong Kids, Healthy Kids. Okay, that's really good. And would you say more reps, less weight?
Yes, that's right. You don't want to be doing maximums or anything. You know, the repetitions could be 5 to as many as 12 or even 15 or 20 per set, you know, and also done in proper form, because kids so often want to, you know, try to show each other up and might get sloppy. So I would say for a sixth grader too, ideally you want it to be supervised, at least at first, to make sure they know what they're doing. And for certain exercises, like if they're doing a bench press or a squat, I advise the person never do those without safety supports, or at least people to spot them in case they would lose control of the weight if they're using barbells.
That's right. That's so good. And there's so much to what you were saying, whether it's the nutrition to in all different ages. I know there perhaps are different guidelines, of course, for strength training. I want to go back to what you touched on about eating real food. In your book, I'm quoting, you say, think about it, dear reader. What percentage of the foods you eat in a day are real foods, animals or plants that exist in nature without a nutritional label attached versus manufactured ultra-processed foods? And from a psychologist standpoint, you take us into the principle of intermittent reinforcement. You see the food industry, just like the tech industry, has mastered the science of hacking our minds when it comes to addiction. So you talk about something like mouthfeel, and that's the feeling in these Franken foods that they've been able to develop of a sensory experience attached to our cravings by design. And so that therefore makes us eat more than we should. And of course, it's junk food. It's not really fueling our body to the degree that's going to strengthen our systems that we need.
Yeah, and I find that it's so true because, Brooke, like I've trained all these years very intensely. But even myself up to 2 years ago, my waistline was far too big. My blood pressure was too high. My body weight was too high because it said you can't out-exercise a bad diet. And when I started reining these things in, started eating more of the natural foods, I found those addictions went away. For years I thought, boy, how can I control my appetite? I'm always hungry. Well, now that I'm eating steak and eggs and whole-fat dairy and nuts and things, I'm no longer hungry all the time because I'm properly nourished. So I think many people, it should be an encouraging note. If you do move away from the processed food towards the real old-fashioned foods, chances are it will become much easier for you not to overeat because your body, it's being fed and being satisfied.
And I'll say for me, when we last spoke, it was in August. And at that point, I completely had a life change, and I'm still doing that. And there comes a point, at least for me, where I feel like I'm in middle age. And so you hear it's very difficult to change your body composition when you get to a certain point. Although you just made a great argument for being able to do that as we get older in different ways. But we can all improve. And again, it's the small steps. And for me, that looked like I have a lot of cottage cheese and blueberries and might have walnuts and even like that riced cauliflower. You can mix that into like an egg white omelet. And because it doesn't have a taste, it can either be savory or sweet. And even though here we are surrounded by information and people trying to sell us things or fad diets, I still have learned so much in, again, just kind of going back to the basics. And again, when you parallel it to the spiritual life, it's getting those foundational elements really solidly ingrained into our heart, whether that's sacred scripture, the sacraments, understanding the beauty of our devotions. And then from there, it gets exciting. But it's all just one step at a time. And I know we have just a few minutes before the break, and there's so much to try to get in here with your book, You Are That Temple. But one of the things that I wanted to mention, why I think is so important, is the distinction of your subtitle. And I just think it's what sets it apart from everything else out there on the shelves. And it is a Catholic guide to health and holiness. And the reason that's notable is because of the gross distortions that are so prevalent in our culture. If we are a temple, we are told we are a temple, we believe that, then we are a dwelling of the Holy Spirit. And to stop and really consider that is mind-blowing. We bear a great responsibility with that call to be virtuous. And what's being modeled in the world is a very confusing spectrum of extremes. We either see a body positive narrative that elevates unhealthy weight and denies the reality that this might not be healthy, to the pursuit of physical perfection that's on the other end of the extreme, that might include augmenting or implanting things or anabolic steroids. And so I think that virtue, you talk about Aristotle and moderation and the importance of that practice. And that's why the moral virtues are so important. You say, temple tenet number 3 in your book, to build healthy, holy temples, we need to train ourselves in the moral virtues to be able to do what is good for us, the intellectual virtues to know what is truly good, and the theological virtues to know and do what we do for the love and the glory of God. So not vainglory, not vanity, but for the glory of God. We have 2 minutes before the break. Can you maybe touch on the importance of those virtues with our health?
Oh, yes, exactly. And just, like the famous four cardinal virtues, I talk fortitude, the ability to do difficult things or endure difficulties. Well, it almost applies directly. Overcoming difficult obstacles applies to strength training. Enduring discomfort can apply to endurance training or cardiovascular training. So we can call forth that virtue to properly care for our bodies. Temperance or self-control can be applied to how we feed ourselves, of course. Prudence or practical wisdom can be involved in finding the right nutrition and exercise regimen that makes sense for you at this time of your life with the current commitments that you have. And finally, justice is giving each person their rightful due. And I try to address that in You Are That Temple by looking at the special needs of special groups like women, children, older adults, people with mental or physical disabilities. So things like that. And then, I also touch on the intellectual virtues of knowledge, understanding, and wisdom, because it helps to actually learn about what is good for our bodies and to carefully sift through the information that we might see in the newspaper or online articles. But then finally, the ultimate virtues are faith, hope, and love and charity. And ideally, we're going to do all this to become what I call dynamos of charity. We're going to try to build ourselves up so we can better love God and serve our neighbor through our bodies.
It just, when you hear that truth, it clicks and it's like a little fire that ignites and it's beautiful. So thank you. I know we're up against a break. So much more to get to with Dr. Kevin Vost. His latest book is called You Are That Temple, A Catholic Guide to Health and Holiness. My name is Brooke Taylor in for Timmery. She is blessedly out on maternity leave with a new baby, and prayers for her family are appreciated, as her baby girl was born on December 8th, joining mom, dad, and big sister. Had some low oxygen issues, but seems to be doing good. So keep those prayers coming, and your prayers are so appreciated. When we come back, Dr. Vost and I take a look at an article with experts weighing in on emerging health trends for 2023. Is it good? Is it going too far? That's coming up next here on Trending.
You're listening to Trending with Timmery, where you can discuss what matters most to you. Join the conversation, 888-914-9149.
Welcome back to Trending. My name is Brooke Taylor in for Timmery. Dr. Kevin Vost is here. His new book is You Are That Temple, A Catholic Guide to Health and Holiness. Dr. Vost, of your 20 books, this I know is your third book, I think, in which you actually focus on the theme of health and fitness specifically, exclusively. And you have Tending the Temple. I know you also have Fit for Life. What prompted you to write this latest work, You Are That Temple?
Yeah, this one came after, training for, more and more years. I think 2007 is when Fit for Eternal Life came out. So I learned more. I learned some more about exercise. And I also learned all kinds of new things about nutrition that kind of turned some of my older views on their heads. And by changing these nutritional principles myself, they had such a drastic impact on my own body, dropped my blood pressure by over 20 points, dropped my waistline by 6 inches, just felt so much better, completely ended acid reflux I used to have, that I thought I really want to share this with people, because if an old 60-year-old guy like me can make these changes and see all these differences, maybe these kind of general ideas will help others too. So one thing I did too when I wrote the book, I invited 23 other people to share their stories at the end, modern Catholic men and women that can also fill us in on things that they have learned that have helped them in their journey towards health and holiness.
That's right. I remember, because Dr. Patrick Castle is in there, and he's the founder of Life Runners. You've got a great group of Catholic athletes, but also really across the board. Could you highlight a few?
Sure. Well, we talked about Therese. I know a recent author on Therese, Lorraine Bennett, is in there. Dr. Pat Castle, Jared Zimmer of the Word on Fire, Bishop Barron's Word on Fire. Just a variety of folks. There's 2 Catholic priests. There's a former Mr. Universe winner, and there's all kind of personal trainers and just regular people. I think a few of the women in there, they have 8 or 9 children, and one of them has actually competed in bodybuilding. So it's just a very, very interesting mix of men and women.
I want to get to this article, and I see that the clock is ticking here, but we also have Julie on the line, and her question, I think, is one that's very popular. So I want to make sure that we get to Julie with this question in Brentwood, California, on the line. Are you there, Julie? I hope we have her still. Hi, Julie.
Hi, thanks for taking my call.
You're welcome. You were wondering about fasting?
Yeah, I was wondering about, there's a couple of trends out, keto and also intermittent fasting, and, just kind of wondering, are they safe? I'm just so curious about that. I don't know, with a lot of the keto stuff, it's like, eat all the bacon you want, and I'm not sure if that's really safe. And also, the intermittent fasting, it looks like it's good enough, but what if you're a diabetic? I mean, should you be following these trends? And that's what I was just really curious about.
Great question. Thanks,
Julie.
Well,
thank you, Julie. Fantastic question. For one thing, too, when you bring up diabetes, you have to be careful with keto because, there's all kinds of different folks out there talking about it. But what I'm doing is a version of that. I don't measure ketones or anything, but it is definitely towards a lower carbohydrate end of the spectrum. Myself, it was dropping 50 or up to 50 or 60 grams a day at most. Yeah, eating more fat, though not as much bacon as I want. More fat, more protein, but all from whole foods. And many people with diabetes and prediabetes have found tremendous results. I mean, some studies have been done where people who've been on insulin for years can go off of it by a significant reduction in the sugars that we're constantly feeding ourselves. So I think there's a lot to the low carbohydrate literature, but you have to be careful to get it from dependable sources. In the book, I do address this. I have separate chapters on carbohydrate and fat and protein, and I give a bunch of sources from different medical professionals who have different views on this. So I say, as long as it's done, in a rational way, many people can profit from reducing their carbohydrates. I think it's a real effect. It's had a huge impact on me. And in terms of the intermittent fasting, I had all my health gains before I really came across this a year or so ago. And I incorporated just what they call time-restricted eating. My own case, I just stop eating by 5:30 p.m. I don't eat again until after my workout in the morning at about 7 a.m., and I don't snack between meals. So for that, again, like for a diabetic, as long as you're monitoring your blood sugar, most people will find that it's actually going to be helpful because you're not going to have as many spikes, up and down. So I do include a chapter in there on fasting as well. So I'd say you want to be careful. If you do this, you want to do it under your doctor's supervision. But many people will find benefit from a carbohydrate reduction and from some form, the form that's proper for them, of a time-restricted eating or some kind of mild fasting.
Well, thank you so much for shedding some light on that because I've been trying to do some research and it just seems like everybody's saying something different and I'm confused and, I talked to my doctor and she was just like, Julie, fruits and vegetables, eat more of them, less of junk food.
And protein, I think protein too.
Direction. Yeah.
No, that is right too. And for some of this keto, there's all kinds of ultra-processed keto products on the shelves now. And that's not what I'm talking about. I'm with your doctor who's telling you basically to eat real foods.
Thanks, Julie. And I'll add it from a woman's perspective, too. And again, everyone's different. So I think that's why it was so good, wise, Dr. Vost, just to say, talk with your doctor, is that for me as a woman, what was happening is during intermittent fasting, it was affecting my I think it was my serotonin, but it was triggering a stress response, which then put all of my hormones out of whack. And it wasn't good physically for me. And so now I actually eat 6 times a day, which was very weird and difficult to get used to after years of fasting. But again, it might be just a few grapes and nuts and blueberries and some beef jerky, and then 3 meals. But that's what I love about your book is you really do take us through the whole person, and we know that's the beauty of our faith, the dignity of the human person and the whole person, and saying you have to really go on a journey with it. And again, start small and sensible, hydrate, drink water. As you mentioned, maybe it's just adding a few more steps in each day and having real food, not frankenfoods. I don't think we're going to have time to get to that article, which is really a bummer because we were both a bit amused and interested. But one of the things I'll just add with one that everyone's been talking about, and that's the cold plunges. And that's immersing yourself, full body or not, for a period of time in very cold ice water. Any thoughts on that, Kevin?
Yeah, well, I just say, it's been around a long time. I remember when I was a teenager reading the bodybuilding magazines, they had the Polar Bear Club that would go into the Atlantic Ocean on New Year's Day, out by New York, So it's been around a long time. I would just say for some people, there is a caution, especially if you have a cardiac problem, a heart problem, if you know it or don't know it. For some people, that can be a pretty traumatic stress if you would take frigidly cold showers or jump into very cold water. So I'd say, just be careful. For some people it might have benefit, but it's probably not necessary.
Okay. And so much more in your book and in general with all that you've done. You've given our family such a wealth of library of great resources. Dr. Kevin Vost, this latest book that we're talking about today is called You Are That Temple, and it is available out everywhere now?
Yes, I think so. It's from Sophia Institute Press, but it's going to be online and at Catholic bookstores and should be just about everywhere, hopefully.
Well, thank you for your contribution, not just now, but in the decades leading up to today and the decades to come. God bless you, and thank you for your time, Dr. Vost.
Oh, thank you so much, Brooke. It's been my pleasure. God bless.
God bless you. My name is Brooke Taylor. The Rosary Across America with Father Rocky is next. Thank you to my guest, Catholic journalist Bree Dail, joining us from Rome to talk about Pope Benedict XVI's spiritual will, as well as what we might expect from Thursday's funeral. And of course, Dr. Kevin Vost, producer Jim Schraper, Patrick Alog. I'll be back with you on Friday. Joseph Pierce will be with me then here on Trending. And also Jason Craig. He is a Catholic convert and founder of St. Joseph's Farm. God bless you.